Okay, so today we're talking about fuel consumption and use of fuel. Let's jump right into the Discord then, why don't we? Give it a second for the boys to hop in.
Hello.
Howdy do.
That better? You like that?
Yeah, that works well. Thank you.
You did great, Jake. Now keep
Oh,
it up.
thanks.
All right. All right,
I
gentlemen.
need, yeah, I need that.
What we're talking about today is going to be fuel consumption in the U.S. and sustainable acts around it. What types of different variables go into fuel, and what we think would be posed the best option. I know that we have a couple articles in the chat that we had talked about briefly, very briefly, I should say, um, as well as some resource material talking about what's going on in more specifically Pac Northwest. With that being said, how do you guys feel about in 2030 no longer selling any sorts of fossil fuel related vehicles?
Horribly.
Yeah, I don't think it's gonna go that well. I think it's all fine and
No.
dandy on paper, but
And why
it's
why
not.
do you why do you think that it's going to go down poorly?
Uh,
Infrastructure and grid is not supportive, and it's going to take way longer than just, what is it, 6, 7 years to grow the infrastructure to support any sustainable or anything that it comes to reusable or sustainable energy.
I have a question for you, Orion, real quick.
Yeah, I have an answer for you, boss. What's going on?
Is mentioning politics in any way, shape, or form okay?
Mentioning politics is 1,000% okay. And actually, thank you for asking that question. So, part of sustainability and environmental studies is understanding the full social aspect of it as well as the environment that we put ourselves into. So, this is 1,000% a political conversation. The table is completely open here. Let's try to steer
Well,
clear of our specific views on which party is better or whatever like that. But
Of course. Okay.
essentially, yes, politics is going to be a huge limiting factor. I mean, where does money come from for sustainable movements? Exactly. I
Okay.
mean, you get what I'm saying?
Gotcha. Yes. So, reason I ask, actually, saw a clip the other day of Biden was in a conference and he was talking about, I think it was
oh, the big oil
oil.
and yeah,
Yeah.
big oil and how he had a conversation with big oil and he's like, why are you raising prices? Why are you worried about all this? You're gonna be here in the next 10 years anyways.
Yeah, he was trying to bring it into the states and you know bring jobs into the U.S. and whatnot. But the fact that he was saying, "Oh, we're gonna need you for a long time," it's like, well, it's not really what. I think that is a realistic approach, but it's different than what's being touted.
What do you mean?
They're acting like fossil fuels are going to be irrelevant in 6, 7 years or whatever it is, right?
Big oil companies are,
Yeah, well,
as well
oil's fossil
as
fuel.
yeah, fossil fuel. Everybody's acting like, oh, hey, um, the government could shut us down and take this all away just in the snap of the finger. When everybody does know that, that's not a thing. You can't just snap your finger and get rid of it.
Do you find this article on CNN then?
I mean, I can try and find the article.
Yeah, just post in the chat. That'd be great resource
I mean,
material
I know
for
it.
for.
Yeah, I know it's not a good study resource, but I saw it on YouTube Shorts.
I mean, whatever
So do
gets
I.
you to the
So did
media.
I.
Media is a large part of it, right? I mean, if you're getting the content, I mean, ultimately, it's kind of selling you to that point. But like, nonetheless, you're 1,000% right. I mean, people are talking about the use of oil and the different types of non-sustainable sources of fuel consumption that we're using even for daily commuting, and they are speaking as if it's never going to be important after these dates. But what they're not really alluding to is like what's going to happen to those people that are still in like low income homes that are using gas vehicles because they don't have the essentially funding to go buy a brand new Tesla, or they don't have the funding or means to essentially land in these different spots. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So what's going to happen to them? What is going to happen to these fuel stations? Are they just going to slowly start ramping up the prices of gas like they have been doing for the last 5 years, to this aggressive extent, and blame it on other things just to try to get these people out of those cars? Or what? That's a huge question. And
It is.
I know in Oregon they've done a lot more to be putting out more electrical stations for different types of vehicle use. But I'm curious, Dane, what are you seeing on the East Coast? Is it the same?
I don't really follow it.
I'm just saying, like driving around day to day, going to gas stations and whatever. Do you see more electrical stations than you do on the West Coast? I know they used to live here, right?
Actually, no, I don't. I guess that's not really surprising to me. But that was part of what I was looking into with, like when I was looking at getting an electric vehicle potentially. Uh, look at charging stations, and at least in my area specifically, there's not a lot at all. Around like Atlanta, Georgia area, there's obviously a lot there. It tends to follow bigger cities, which makes sense because they're expensive. So you want to put them in places that they're going to be used and be profitable. My area is not quite like that. It's more rural over here, so it's a lot of diesels and a lot of just big SUVs. And at least as of right now, electric vehicles still aren't quite up to snuff for hauling or size and range. Because here, and shoot, even to get to, we're having this issue now with people flying in or me flying out. I have to drive 5 hours if anyone wants to fly to come visit me. I have to go to an international airport, which is 2.5 hours away.
That's a really good point. I just pulled up the essentially charging stations map that they have for the U.S. right now, and I'm imposed to think that this isn't fully accurate. I just went live for you guys in the chat as well, so you could see the difference here. But I'm at disposed to think that this isn't 100% right. I mean, just essentially like looking at the East Coast and where they have these massive pockets is just massive cities. But then like let's imagine these people living out in more rural climates, more rural locations in between these blips. That these are hundreds of miles. You know what I mean? Like that's a
Yeah, and I'm looking at my area here. There's some, but they definitely follow the main highways. But then once you kind of get a little bit further north to where I'm at, there's nothing.
Yeah, I would be inclined to believe that even just run like look at Maine for example. Holy cow! Let's say you live in northern Maine, you're
Maine
screwed.
state.
You're never gonna leave your hometown. Look at that! Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, the West Coast has done a pretty damn good job of lining up the I-5 and then just the border. But I mean, aside from that, if you live in Southern Oregon, you're getting no electrical charging stations aside from just your house.
You said Southern Oregon?
Yeah,
Yeah.
southeastern Oregon is just nothing there.
Yeah, Klamath Falls.
Yeah.
There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then a 7th that's kind of far away. That is it.
But like, could you imagine trying to drive from Klamath Falls to go visit your family out in the desert in Paisley?
Yeah, that was my issue. Because, as you guys know, my brother is not too far away from us. So that's kind of how I was gauging things. Could I take a trip to his house
Right.
by driving? And I would have to, at least in my budget, of course, a Tesla has higher range than most, but I can't afford a Tesla. With the cars that I could afford, I could not make it to my brother's without stopping to charge. And then finding a charging station is out of the way. So now I'm making a 4.5 hour trip into a 5.5 or 6 hour trip because this car also did not have quick charging.
Wow. Well, that's
So-
that's a really decent point as well. I mean, we're talking about vehicles that have only specific ranges, and you can't just fill it up with gas and keep on going. There's not enough fuel stations like I wish this would.
Mhm.
Look, there's a drop down for all fuels. Look at
I
that.
was like, did you realize Oregon has gone backwards?
What do you mean by
When it
that,
comes-
Jake?
Yeah, what do you mean?
So when it comes to doing sustainable fuels and all that stuff, I'm sorry, babe, I can't. I'm having a conversation with them right now. Give me just a second.
All right, we'll keep the conversation rolling.
Okay.
Well, anyway, Jane, we'll just hop right back into what you were talking about with electrical vehicles. So I know for a fact that you have been, looking into getting another rig recently, and you've been thinking about electrical as a viable option. How are you with that conversation? Are you deterred from that? What's the buyer experience like in that mindset?
I guess the first roadblock I hit was, at least in my area, electric cars aren't super easy to come by. That was also during the peak of the pandemic, so just availability for anything was trash. I have not considered it further though, because of, well, one, cost, and also that's a little more of personal circumstance thing.
Mm-hmm.
Just what's to come here in 2 years for me. I don't want to owe money on anything, and I can't afford to just buy an electric car.
Well, cost is 1,000% relevant, especially when you're looking into electrical vehicles. And being that a lot of the states are starting to push, I'm speaking West Coast here, are starting to
Mhm.
push for more electrical and less, um, essentially ethanol based vehicles.
Mhm.
It makes sense to me that cost is a big limiting factor, but I think that also you can go into talking about how different manufacturers that have seen like the rebates that the federal government's giving. If you're not sure of what that is, it's essentially they'll give you, I think it's like
Yeah,
7,500 back, and some states even add additional to 25. Something similar to that. Long story short is, for example, Tesla. They saw that that rebate was going to be released to those who were buying electrical vehicles, and
Mhm.
they started ramping up their prices to make the subsequent for it because they wanted to get the money from that rebate essentially, and then they
Yeah, because
also
I
wanted
know
to
the people are paying 7,500 less than MSRP
right
immediately.
exactly,
Yeah,
and you know,
and
go ahead.
sorry, go ahead.
No,
Oh,
no.
okay. My state doesn't offer any rebates, so I was looking at the time at using my Oregon, uh, not citizenship. Why am I residency? There we go. That's the
Yeah.
word. I was going to use my Oregon residency, purchase a car in Oregon, pay no taxes, get the federal rebate, get the state rebate,
Right.
and then I would have the problem of getting it to South Carolina. So
Right.
I either pay the astronomical shipping price or I drive it, which is already what, like a 20 or like a 40-hour drive, I think it was. But then I would have to stop to charge every 3 hours for an hour.
Well, for giggles, let's figure out what the electronic map for that looks like. This tool seems to give it to us. Carolina, and granted, this might be a different kind of look, but let's see what it does. Um, yeah, look at that. If you add electric, find stations. I mean, what they're doing is essentially running you down these major highways, but they're not considering any of the conditions, and some of these vehicles are not built for uh, storms. Like
Mhm.
I recently made a trip through Montana and even Idaho, and it was just horrendously covered in snow. I mean, unless you're driving in the sun, on in the middle of the summer where you can experience extreme heats, even. I mean,
Mhm.
you're detouring hours and days even to then accommodate this map that might not have your specific type of plug.
Yeah, that's
And
my other gripe actually. Battery performance in extreme heat and extreme cold. I haven't heard too many problems with extreme heat, but extreme cold, I know Teslas aren't even starting. I don't know if that's a widespread issue, but what's weird to me is they're supposed to have heaters by the batteries to keep them at a operable temperature. But yeah, a lot of people's cars are just dying overnight when it snows, or their range is like 10 miles. And something crashed, which I don't have that same concern or really possibility with a conventional internal combustion engine.
and I fully understand and agree with that. I mean, honestly, when you talk about economical range and then moving from place to place, it really does affect what you can and can't do with your vehicle, and
Yeah, and I don't know where I'm going to be in 2, 3 years time. So
and
I might be in a very snowy state, might be in a very hot state. I
that
don't know.
that's a very fair point. What about you, Jake? What do you feel about electrical vehicles?
He might not be back.
Is he not back?
No, I'm back.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
I'm
Oh,
back.
okay.
Thought I heard him.
Well, you're talking about like sustainability with electrical vehicles. It's hard to be sustainable when the power grid it comes from
It's coal.
is coal.
Let's
That's what
talk
I was
California.
that's what I was about to bring up is in Oregon. So in 2012, 46% of energy came from hydropower. That's the link that I pointed or I put in the chat. You had 5.39 and wind, 3.11 and nuclear. So and then with you like coal and natural gas and petrol and biomass and all that other stuff that's affecting us. Uh, in total, 44.7% was used in Oregon. That was 2012.
Wow.
In 2020, only 38% is hydro, and our use of coal, natural gas, all that stuff has gone up, and now we're at 47%, 47.9% in coal and natural gas. So the use of hydro has gone down, which you can bring up the argument that it helps the rivers and fish and all that stuff. But everything else that's supposed to, like wind, solar, and all that stuff, has only very little bit has gone up, while natural gas has gone up 10%.
Wow, no, that's actually a really good graph there that they're showing here too. Thanks for that,
Yeah.
Jake. That's a really good point. Yeah, we've used more coal more recently than we have any other more sustainable sources, to include
Well,
natural
it's a
gas.
Yeah,
supply and
coal,
demand
natural
thing.
gas. Yeah.
Wow,
When we're being pushed to go all electric by what was the year again?
2023 or 2030, excuse me.
I was like 2023. Holy.
Yeah, no, 2030.
Okay, so we have 7 years. Um, in the world of energy production, nuclear is still relatively new. Like coal is old, right? We got that stuff down to a science. I don't know if it's the cheapest thing to stand up, but when you have the surge of demand for energy,
Mhm.
they're probably going to go with the cheapest form of energy production to meet the demand, which I'm suspecting is coal. I'm trying to Google it right now to figure that out.
Yeah, no, please.
But also, not every state is very good for solar panels. So even if solar panels are typically cheaper, solar panels in Oregon are going to be useless 95% of the time.
Yeah, I mean, well, there's a lot more science that goes behind solar panels than I think people even allude to, especially people that know what they're installing. I had a buddy that used to be one of the mechanics, or like I called him a mechanic, but one of the installers for solar panels, and she told me a bunch of different types of stuff about how you can actively use a solar panel to increase your rate of electricity consumption so much so that you can get money back from the government because you're putting power back into the grid. But the major
Yeah.
thing that people don't talk about is how much energy and you essentially amass and store inside your own home. Because half of the solar panel is a capacitor. You know, this is you got to
It
think.
kind of depends. So I actually did consider getting solar panels for a little bit because South Carolina is one of the best states actually for, like, we have the most sunlight.
Update me. Let me hear what's going on the East Coast.
So yeah, South Carolina is fantastic for solar panels. We have the most amount of hours per day. Like, we're definitely up there in the states that have the most sunlight during the day, and it's mostly sunny most of the time. But at least the plan that I was considering did not include capacitors or batteries. So you would use the power company as a battery.
You just feed into the power network.
So essentially,
Yeah,
you're just
and
taking money back from them. You're giving them money to then take back from them the power.
Yeah.
yeah, and they didn't pay me for it, or they weren't going to pay me for it, but it's a credit kind of. Hey, you produced, or you gave us. I don't even know the measurements. I'm not an electrical engineer. You gave us 3 hours of power, so you can use 3 hours of power from us,
Wow.
charge free.
I mean,
But yeah, so not all places do have. I think it's even based on the county or maybe even the power company, whoever it is. But that's not just a federal thing. It's different everywhere you go, which makes it very complicated.
well, yeah, and I mean, it's state to state. Depends on what you're going to get back out of it, what you can do, and what you can't do. I mean, shoot, I don't even want to bring it this far this way, but you know, we can't even collect rainwater in Oregon. You know what I mean? Like, that's legal. It's like the
Yeah.
thing that you have to go through a whole process and get permits for and all that. So I mean, it's a whole mindset of like how much can we actually do as homeowners or as singular people to then improve our more sustainable energy sources. With that being
We
said, though,
can't collect rainwater.
You have to have a permit.
you have to have a permit to collect rainwater. Can you believe that? And it's expensive.
So I mean, I'm collecting rainwater right now. I got a bucket outside. Am I gonna get?
Don't tell him, Jake.
Yeah.
Don't tell him.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, you're not supposed to though.
yeah, it's supposedly taking money out of the company, the water company, or the state. It's one of those ridiculous clauses that I think they don't really think about how positive it could be for the environment.
Honestly, that brings up a good point. I think a big thing with sustainability is allowing people to
be
making it
sustainable?
simpler. Yes, like collect rainwater. That's an easy thing. if you wanted a very inefficient system, yeah, just throw a 55-gallon drum in your backyard and collect rainwater. Bam.
Well, so let's
But
talk about rainwater
that's
first.
illegal.
Yeah, well, like here, let's go further into that. Let's talk about rainwater for a second. I know, Jake, recently you were talking to me about hydrogen vehicles. How do you feel about those? What's going on with hydrogen vehicles?
Well, I know absolutely nothing about them, but I do know that I think it was Toyota, or was it Toyota?
Yeah, it was Toyota.
Toyota is coming. They have released and has came out with a hydrogen powered vehicle in Japan.
Interesting. I'm curious here. With the hydrogen powered vehicle in Japan, like what do you think that we would be gaining from hydrogen power? Are you familiar with how hydrogen power works? If not, I can give a little brief synapse on it.
I'm looking stuff up right now.
Okay, well, while you're looking it up, I'll elucidate a little bit. Hydrogen powered vehicles, essentially, it's using water as the fuel. You add water to a hydrogen cell in which the hydrogen decays, and hydrogen gas is very combustible. So, I mean, essentially, what you'd be doing is carrying to the hydrogen engine as it uses hydrogen to combust. But the one thing I'm not very certain on is like what is coming out in exhaust. What
I
do we?
think it's just water vapor, if I remember correctly.
Let's Google it. Let's pull it up together. Why don't we? You know what they say? GTS. Google that stuff, man.
Yeah. When hydrogen is the fuel, the only byproduct is water. Unlike our common combustion engines, which can create harmful byproducts like nitrogen oxides. Oh, this place must be reliable because it's Argonne National Laboratory.
Yep, must be.
Okay, so are they actually just using pure water? Are they using salt water? What is?
No, they're not using water. They're using it's a pure hydrogen gas.
No. I'm saying for what they're putting in the tank.
No, I think it's a hydrogen cell that contains hydrogen.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I thought hydrogen was a metal here.
The
Hydrogen's a gas.
Yeah, it's a gas. So what I'm saying,
when solid hydrogen comes in contact with water, it becomes extremely reactive. And that's
well,
where I thought that the science for this came from. Go ahead. Sorry, I don't.
No, so what they do is it's a hydrogen vehicle because hydrogen is extremely flammable, and we've just never been able to harness the energy from it. So what it is you're pumping just straight hydrogen gas into your vehicle that pretty much goes into a combustion engine,
Mm-hmm.
but instead you're using the hydrogen instead of fuel, in which hydrogen is one of the most abundant resources that other than nitrogen that is in the atmosphere.
Interesting. And then what comes out of the exhaust then?
Water.
Really?
Yeah, that's the link I just posted. It said when hydrogen is the fuel, the only byproduct is water, unlike IC engines, which create harmful. Yeah, okay.
But can we talk about how that car is and obviously ethanol-based vehicles aren't going to be much different, but that's basically a bomb on wheels, right?
Well, so is gasoline.
So is gasoline.
Yeah, but like the difference is like.
So is propane. I mean, you have propane buses and propane vehicles all over.
What happens when like high-end cars get in a wreck? They explode in a ball of fire.
Yeah, what happens to Teslas when the batteries get nicked and they get in a wreck? You can't put that fire out.
You can't. You couldn't put a hydrogen fire out either.
Yeah, you can. There are certain chemicals that
you can do the same with but who's gonna have a chemical extinguisher just on hand decked and
firefighters?
Firefighters. Every firefighter.
I'm just thinking. The reason I asked this question is because like I'm thinking I'm driving through Montana, right? There's not a lot of places to stop when you're driving through Montana. The same goes for gas vehicles as well, but I mean like. You got a pressurized tank of hydrogen. That's just intense. I know.
What about? I know now we're just arguing.
No, I'm here for it. Go ahead.
Kind of
please
random stuff. But what if it was almost like a jet where you have fire extinguisher cartridges? So if there was a wreck, those would initiate with whatever chemical it is that extinguishes hydrogen.
Can you pull up a diagram for me to see in the chat there?
Are you talking to me?
Yeah. I want to see what you're talking about with the jet. the
Oh,
extinguisher cartridge.
fire?
It's just like, yeah, something to see what that retarding that flame retarding system looks like.
It. I mean, it's gonna look like a ball of metal.
I'm just that's it's an interesting point in case. I mean, but further than that, we were talking about electrical vehicles in the same light, and I'm curious, like, you're 100% right. Lithium gas being released from these, lithium metal being exposed to air and creating this toxic fume and flame that's just ridiculously strong. Like, it's not something that we can just put out regularly. And the same, I would imagine the same goes for, these hydrogen vehicles. So like, what happens when a car gets in a wreck and the cells are fine, but the rest of the car isn't? Same with electrical. The decomposition of lithium is way longer than it takes to decompose gas, but minus
That's my other gripe with electric vehicles. Is
Yeah.
do you know where those metals are frequently sourced from?
No, where are they from?
Child labor.
Child labor
Really?
Like lithium. Where I forgot
or
exactly
cobalt.
where.
Like lithium
Yeah.
mines, I imagine.
Yeah, it's what country is it? I can't remember.
No, I do know that they have like cobalt mines that are horrifically spent with child.
Yeah, it's terrible. And you know what? They're not in super developed areas that have higher organizations to inspect them. As long as they produce the good, that's all they care. So a lot of times these companies are actually using, maybe not even a company, I don't know how they run. They'll use lead, for example,
Wow.
or mercury
Wow.
to help extract. Is it coal or gold? I think it's gold mining. They'll use terrible chemicals because it's cheap and it works.
I mean, cobalt is used in the batteries as well, right? I believe so.
Yes, I believe so.
I do know there's some really cheap batteries that can have cobalt in them, but we use cobalt in like even money sometimes, which is kind of crazy. No, that's
So
that's
there
really-
is a one of the world's largest mines is in the Congo, and I think it's like, I don't know the numbers, but it's the vast majority of cobalt comes from the Congo. And there are a lot of videos, TikTok shorts, stuff like that on it.
people just showing the kids
Just
working.
yeah.
Wow.
You'll have these 12-year-old kids with like crooked backs because they're just hauling stuff around all day.
Well, I mean, that raises a really good point about like Western versus Eastern countries. Even talking about like how are we fixing the problem for us, but forgetting about everything that goes into it, like the whole process of creating these sustainable means, quote unquote. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
is it truly sustainable if we're all just hopping in and using other types of means of sources to where we're destroying other environments and other types of societies to then only truly benefit ourselves, which is
Out of sight, out of mind. Not
Yeah.
a problem.
literally,
That's-
and we just kind of hover on that, and that's crazy to me.
Check
Now-
out that graph I just posted real quick.
Let's pull that sucker up, huh?
This
What am I
is
looking at?
lithium production. What's interesting to me is as demand for lithium has increased, the U.S. has produced less and less, and Australia blew up. Chile.
So they're mining lithium from Australia is what you're putting into.
lithium.
go.
It looks
I
like
have
that's the predominant one. Yeah.
Wow.
I also have a TikTok video of the mine in the Congo where 70% of the where 70% of the cobalt comes from in the world.
Yeah, I think I was probably thinking of cobalt then.
Let's see that TikTok video. I'm here for that. Wow! Holy cow! Look at that.
These are mines that are certain mines to get certain that certain people can buy from. It's I forget what it's called, but mining with your hands and all that stuff is called something that is frowned upon. I forget what the phrase is and all that stuff, but most companies in the United States, they have regulations and laws saying that they can't buy from mines that don't actually use proper equipment or proper,
Wow.
child care laws, acts, and all that stuff. But yet, this mine supplies 75% of the world, or 72% of the world's cobalt,
Wow.
Which
and
is
it's
funny
all
because
it's all mined by hand.
so that graph I had posted,
Yeah.
74% of the lithium consumed is for batteries.
74% of the lithium consumed is for batteries.
14% for ceramics and glass, 12% for other.
Wow.
Yeah.
Isn't that something?
So yeah, electrical vehicles are great. It's just, does the world have enough resources and means to create all the batteries?
And additionally, what are we doing for these people that are essentially just kind of losing their lives so we can drive around on electrical vehicles?
The same thing we've always done.
Yeah.
Pay them for the work and don't ask questions.
This is
So hydrogen
absolutely
is
appalling.
looking better and better.
Well, hydrogen has been around for a lot longer than we wanted to allude to. Similar to, and I'll bring the whole conversation back to diesel here. This is my favorite convo. And I know that we're all kind of in agreement on diesel, but we'll get there. Diesel in general is actually a little bit more sustainable than was ever led onto, and it's been around for a lot longer than people even know. The creator of diesel even took one to the head from mobile oil companies because they didn't want that conversation going out that there's something better than gas running off of essentially lamp oil, right? An unrefined source, and it just absolutely boggles my mind. So the prices of diesel, went up with ethanol because they wanted to compete. They would buy out the rights to the diesel engine from the man who originally created it, and then they would constantly drive up the prices to then be suitable for ethanol, so that ethanol's still a viable option. I know, Dan, when I was a little bit more naive to diesel, you told me your dad, when he bought his old Excursion way back when, was given a quote from the salesman, something similar to, diesel's always going to be cheaper than gas. And that was probably when, like 2008?
Car was an 04, so probably 04.
Wow, man.
Oh, wait, was it? It wasn't 08. Hold on. It was the last year they made them.
Well, I mean, diesel is also, biodiesel can be made from corn as well.
You can make it from French fry grease.
You can make it from French fry grease. So just looking up the usage of, because corn is one of the biggest productions of ethanol.
Mm-hmm.
In the United States, 20% of the production of corn, 26% of it goes to making ethanol.
That doesn't surprise me.
Oh wow, that is actually quite interesting. Well, what's even kind of worse in that light too is like the fact that diesels, and I did a lot of research on this back in the day a couple times actually, for talking about like the use of biodiesel and how it can be more effective. And I'm gonna pull up what Jake just posted in the chat here, but where diesel actually is really impressive is the fact that biodiesels can be created from almost anything, and it is very crude oil, but it's also very unrefined, which means there's less factories dedicated to pumping more nonsense into the atmosphere. And there's granted, the diesel itself has particulate and whatnot that can be put out into the atmosphere, but most of that runoff in particulate can actually be consumed by plants. More of it can be consumed by plants the more we refine our biodiesels and the more that we explore these options. And further than that, you're not going to have to get rid of it. You're not going to run out of your 200-mile range when you're driving to go see your brother, or you're not going to be worried on whether or not you can pull your trailer full of all your belongings to the next place you move. All these different types of options are definitely becoming more and more apparent, that we're not really thinking about the overall theme or idea that people are behind what's going on. And additionally, where is diesel coming from? Where are we pulling biodiesel from? Because if you can take an algae bloom, which is a negative thing, mind you, for the environment, and turn that into biodiesel, in which people are, especially in Utah, I can't remember if it was Utah State or not, but essentially they took algae-based biodiesels and they took the refinement process. It takes a while, but essentially they were able to create fuel from that. And it was just algae pond scum, and they were able to do it in rapid succession, and the particulate was then able to be consumed by more roadside plants than not, which I just found absolutely baffling. What do you guys think?
I agree. I think diesel was done. Well, no, because I think they were becoming popular because they have a lot higher torque. So they were used for farming, like tractors. They were used for big trucks because of the range, the fuel efficiency, just the torquey beefiness, and just how they're built. They tend to last longer. But people start associating diesel with big, loud, smelly vehicles.
Well,
Like
I
that,
mean,
like that one right there.
like 40
Uh,
years ago, diesel was more toxic for the environment.
So diesel particulates actually fall into the ground. I don't know which one's better or worse, but it doesn't float away
So
like
essentially,
You know,
gasoline does.
it doesn't float away, but at the same, it was like now biodiesel is still somewhat harmful, but not as harmful as most.
Hmm
40, 50 years ago, when diesel was first getting introduced into vehicles and stuff like that, I guess like 60, 70 now,
hmm
it was it was a lot more harmful. There wasn't filters to filter out some of the bad stuff, anything. It was
that's
just
true. Yeah.
and they've
straight going into the now they have, I mean, a lot of people get rid of them, but I mean, and they do deleting kits, but they have catalytic converters and all that stuff that can actually filter out the more harmful toxins that go out there.
no.
Yeah, and even now, the most common trucks, or sorry, newer trucks, they have the exhaust fluid. So
But
when you,
that's worse for the environment than diesel
I think
itself.
it produces ammonia because the exhaust
It is
it smells
ammonia.
like Windex.
It's made of ammonia.
Yeah.
It's ammonia and
But-
water. It's mixed
and
together.
that's
Exhaust fluid is ammonia and water mixed together. I believe the rate is like 95 to 5% water.
apparently you can use deer
Ammonia,
pee
something like
as DEF.
I mean, I don't want to find out whether or not DRP is going to work, but ultimately, I mean, and that's probably just because of how much ammonia is in it. But
I
nonetheless,
think so.
like there are options in better recovery for diesel engines putting out particulate, and then there is also a lot of stigma around diesel in general, just because like people they see it now it's bad, right? Similar to what we were just talking about all these lithium mines. It's like, oh, I see that there's a lithium mine in my back door. Now I understand that this is a bad thing. But like with diesel fumes, the particulate does actually go back down into the earth mostly. There is a lot that still sits in the air, and it's not the perfect solution, I mean, by any means. But I think it's definitely more viable to get more people on, biodiesels by 2030 than it is to just cut off all purchase and sale of ethanol-based, gases.
Yeah.
That being
agree.
said, as well, like I mean, plants literally can consume diesel particulate. Humans cannot breathe it, but you can't breathe the clear stuff out the back of your ethanol vehicle either. You know what I mean? It's not. It's just because you can't see what's happening from the back of your car, and you only see smoke every now and again when your car's in trouble. I mean, it doesn't mean that it's ultimately a bad. It's an evil within itself. I mean, it's just how much are we going to cut down? What are we going to do with all that processed and dug up oils and fuels, and what do we do going forward? So I think, I don't know, guys. Have we come up to a decision here? What do you guys think?
About diesels or as
Just
a whole?
do you think that we can kill this cell of ethanol gas effectively by 2030? And
No.
you don't think
And
it's
if
gonna
we
work?
do, I think it's going to be a lot worse in the long run.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that honestly, if it was me, I'd be putting more bio-based diesel plants into production. Be listening to some research and students.
Well, right now there's probably a lot of.
There's
Subsidies
more
and
electrical
stuff
charging
in-
stations than biodiesel.
Oh yeah, by far. Yeah.
Mhm.
But I'm assuming there's probably a lot of benefits and incentives to build electric vehicles at this point.
There is
So
just
why? And they're all companies. They're chasing money. Why would
Yeah.
you? Why would you build a biodiesel plant out of the goodness of your heart? Because you're gonna go broke after a month. The government's gonna squash you, or
Oh,
the people are gonna squash you.
now you're just getting into this societal and what's
Well, I
wrong
think
with
that's a
society.
big part of sustainability, though.
It is 1,000%. Society is a large portion that feeds into sustainable actions and takes. I mean, and I believe both of you are making very valid points here. But to kind of turn the corner a little bit here, I'm thinking that honestly, that if we spent more time on developing the hydrogen vehicle as we've been talking about, because it's literally putting water out of all the solutions, it seems like hydrogen's probably the best.
Yeah.
But in the interim, I think that instead of trying to like promote more lithium mines, perhaps, and while we're trying to find more sustainable sources of gaining hydrogen, I would say that if we started to lean more on biodiesels and cutting down just like different types of algae blooms in different areas as well by using that to make out biodiesels. I mean, I don't know how familiar you all are with algae blooms, but they can make water toxic
None
and
at all.
kill an environment completely in that area because it's not a healthy thing for plants and wildlife.
I have a solution to it all.
Okay, give me your solution and we'll wrap it up there.
Build mega cities.
Mega cities, more cities.
Yep. Well, no. You know what
Are
the
you-
mega cities are? Like the ones where it's like one giant building with different sections of it. Like
No.
you
I was
work
about
in
to
the
say,
left section.
are you talking about in the Middle East right now? They're making it's called like freaking. It's gonna be like 10 or like 100 miles long.
Yeah.
Like
That's the one. You don't need a car then.
You need a ton of engineers and a bunch of people to think about whether or not this is going to collapse on me. You're going to need a rascal to get around at that point. You'd be so tired. Oh my gosh. You're all going to be looking like
Yeah.
the people from Wall-E.
Yeah. I guess to wrap up my concern with electric vehicles, though,
All right.
because sure, while they're on the road and driving around, they may not be as bad as other alternatives, right? But the production and also the lifespan of them tends to be a lot less than other vehicles. Because you get vehicles all the time that are like 200,000 plus miles. Yeah, that's kind of hard to find, but you can. And I don't think a Tesla could last that long.
I mean, you know that the average truck, like a semi-truck, or lorry if you're from England, they're on average is 1,000,000 miles. Can you believe
Yep.
that?
Those are also not comparable to daily drivers, though.
Well, I mean, putting that into perspective, the fact that we do have object obsolescence happening at a large scale in commercial vehicles, and the fact that 1,000,000 miles is something that is obtainable for a smaller vehicle, it just kind of bothers me. We literally build all these different types of plastic pulleys, gears, and things just so that our vehicles will break down. So you have to buy another one, which kind of feeds right back into that cycle of now we need more people to mine more materials so we can make more vehicles because this one broke. Like
Yeah.
things along those lines. No, that's a really good point. But
So
go ahead.
Now, I'm just curious, and I have yet to actually see a graph that encompasses what I'm looking for, but I am curious with the life, like the 5-10 year life, whatever, of a Tesla, you have to purchase the vehicle. So they have to produce a battery, then they have to recycle it when you're done or dispose of it. I don't know what they do with it.
I
Then you have to buy
believe
another one.
Tesla battery lasts between 150 and 200,000 miles.
Okay, that's better than I thought. That's actually right around where
I know
vehicle is, but-
earlier in the lifespan they were saying only 100,000, but now they've increased the lifespan by a lot.
All right, I might
So
crack an egg here that'll lead to a larger conversation. But let's also talk about if you own a Tesla, you have to take your vehicle to get maintenance at a Tesla facility. If you don't, then you are voiding your whole warranty, and your vehicle is no longer comparable to be worked on at those facilities.
Tesla's
Yeah.
the Apple of the car world. Changed my mind.
Yeah.
No, you can't. That's an accurate statement.
Well, no, but here's the thing: is what really maintenance do you have in an electrical vehicle? You don't have a lot of maintenance.
Well, unless your body's
There's-
falling apart and your engines aren't working, I mean, yeah, I guess there wouldn't be anything to work on. There's still oil that goes into these vehicles. It's not like an oil pan that's consuming oil the same way. It's literally got to be lubricated. It's a motor.
And
It has
coolant
friction.
as well.
Coolant, yeah, 1,000%. All the different types of fluids that you'd see for your windshield wipers that exist still. I mean, there's a lot of things that can go wrong with a vehicle that's being used day to day, just due to natural erosion of using and processing a vehicle. But like, ultimately, in total, what we're kind of illustrating here is like they're creating more use for just their vehicles and just their people, which cuts down on jobs. It cuts down on life expectancy of these people in these mines. It cuts down on the amount of money that people will have day to day because they're spending so much money to buy the Tesla. It's just and not to just make Tesla the target. I mean, other companies are doing the same practices because they obviously have been seeing the turnout of that and the money that comes back in. But there isn't a true north here with sustainable fuels. Honestly, right now we don't have a true north. I think that there's a better option to what we're doing. It's just that people aren't ready for those options to be the truth. And I do think that biodiesels have been given a horrifically bad rap, and they could actually solve a lot more like ready right now problems while we start to explore more of the hydrogen realm. Because right now,
I think it's distracting us. Like
do you
we're focused so much on electric vehicles where that may not be sustainable. I mean, either way, no matter how you do it, there's mining involved. It's not sustainable. It's sustainable for the driver. That's it. But metals have to go into it. The batteries have to be recycled, disposed of one way or another, and then you buy another one. It's still not sustainable because you're still mining, and then you have the mining practices that are bad potentially. I think it's distracting us. I really do think that.
I would agree, and I'm inclined to believe that a bicycle is a very sustainable option. But then go to Amsterdam, see how many bicycles are in their lakes and how many bicycles are mounted to their walkways and everything. I mean, it's
Yeah,
literally
but
just
they're pretty good at cleaning up. They do every 2 to 3 years. They section their rivers off and they go in and clean them all up.
well, I mean, sure, but the fact that people are throwing bikes into rivers and
Well, that's just because they're drunk.
well, I mean, that's
Let's be
we're
honest.
pointing at human nature here as a total. Just
Yeah.
and like we'll take anything and bring it to the excess, right? We don't just let it sit at the smaller numbers and be like, okay, yeah, this is cool. It's like no, we're gonna do as much of this as we possibly can until we drop. Nonetheless, thank you guys for the conversation. I'm gonna wrap this up here because we're hitting the 45-minute mark. And
Cool, perfect timing. I gotta go get check on dinner.
all right,
Wait,
well, I'm excited about hear about what you have for food. Anyway, thanks
All right.
for listening.
Thank you. See you guys.
Bye.
Bye.